And now let's take a look at the day's business news. I'm joined by Stephen Carroll from our business desk. Stephen, we're looking at something that we keep monitoring day in, day out, which is the deals between Republicans and Democrats, or I should say the talks, because so far there have been no deals between Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. over the fiscal cliff. You say that now Barack Obama has put something new on the table that might just get them to a deal.
Yeah, they're moving a little bit closer to a position that looks vaguely similar. John Boehner, the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, met with President Obama late on Monday. President Obama afterwards tabled his new offer for where they'll come together on these ideas of tax rises and spending cuts. The Republicans want more spending cuts. The Democrats want more tax rises. The issue is about how much they're going to increase those taxes and who it's going to affect. New ceilings being proposed by President Obama. Nicholas Rushworth has been following the latest in this budget battle.
A new offer on the table. President Barack Obama and the Republican House Speaker John Boehner have edged closer to a deal to avert falling off that fiscal cliff. Obama now is proposing spending cuts of $1.22 trillion over 10 years, down from $1.6 trillion initially. The top tax bracket would rise to 39.6% from the current 35% for those earning more than $400,000 US. The Republicans over the weekend proposed a hike of the top tax band, though for those earning more than $1 million a year.
In order to achieve a broad deficit reduction package that puts our economy on a sustainable fiscal path in the future, a certain level of revenue gleaned from the wealthy has to be met.
Monday's compromise proposal has raised hopes there will be a deal ahead of the 31st of December deadline. Once both parties agree, it'll take around a week for the legislation to pass in the House and Senate. Also being discussed is how to stop recurrent fiscal showdowns. Obama wants the right to raise the borrowing cap ceiling without a prior vote by Congress.
So how did the markets react to the news of this easing of tensions between Democrats and Republicans?
Well, Wall Street closed before we had details of President Obama's offer, but there was sufficient optimism around about the rumours going around of a deal to impress the markets. They all closed up. The Nasdaq, the highest there, just over 1.3%. That's despite a warning from General Electric that the fiscal cliff fears has actually driven down its revenues in the fourth quarter of this year. Although some of the optimism hanging around did manage to push the Asian markets into positive territory today, most of them still in green. You can see there the Nikkei up almost 1% after the continued optimism after the election results there on Sunday. One particular share that we were talking about on Monday was the shares in nuclear company TEPCO in Japan. They rose by a third after the victory of the Conservative Party there. The Conservative Party, of course, willing to keep nuclear power in Japan, which is something the outgoing government had proposed to reduce in the country. Shares up again today, up by almost 20%. So they're still riding on that optimism from that election result.
And you're also looking at the French government's efforts to improve the efficiency of its public services. They're going to be discussing that today.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, a similar debate of reducing public spending as they're having in the US, although on a very different scale. $65 billion over 5 years. That's what the French government needs to cut from its public expenditure budget. Why? Well, $50 billion has to go to reducing the budget deficit, another $10 billion for measures to help France compete better abroad, something we know François Hollande has been pushing. And there's another $5 billion in there as well. They're trying to launch new social programmes, combat poverty and things like that. And so that's how they need to collect $65 billion from cuts to the public services. The President's already said there won't be any job losses in the public sector, but it's a difficult battle for the Prime Minister, who's trying to balance all of the key concerns.
It concerns both the government itself, which can do more to manage its spending better to be more efficient, and also the social security system in general, as well as the local authorities. It's about how by spending less and more effectively, we can improve the efficiency of our administration and the public services.
A quick look now at some of the day's company news. The US bank Morgan Stanley has been fined $5 million by US regulators over problems with Facebook's launch on the stock exchange. Morgan Stanley was accused of only telling certain analysts about concerns over the social network's revenue stream instead of telling the general public. The bank was handling the company's debut on the Nasdaq. Facebook's shares have fallen by some 30% since they began trading.
A federal judge in the United States has denied a request by Apple to ban the sale of rival Samsung's smartphones. Apple was awarded over $1 billion in damages in August after a jury found that Samsung had copied critical features of the iPhone and the iPad. This decision is part of a series of rulings from the judge who is examining the outcome of that case.
And the French car maker Renault is expected to announce it's opening a factory in Algeria as President François Hollande is on an official visit to the country. Le Figaro newspaper is reporting that the project has been agreed in principle and that the Algerian state will take a 51% stake in it. Renault sales have almost doubled in Algeria over the past year.
And back here in the Eurozone, Stephen, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, has been saying that Ireland might be given a bit more breathing space to implement the cuts that are required.
Yeah, the IMF has just paid out the latest instalment of its bailout loan to Ireland, but they've said in their assessment of the Irish economy that perhaps the country should be given a little bit more time to make the cuts required under the bailout programme. Until 2015 is their suggestion. The idea is to make sure that the recovery isn't damaged too much by the austerity measures that Ireland has been going through, 6 austerity budgets so far. This comes as Ireland is preparing to take over the presidency of the European Council in January. Foreign Minister Eamon Gilmore said in Brussels yesterday that one of the big priorities then will be tackling the issue of legacy bank debt. This is a really important issue for Ireland. It's where most of the bailout money has gone to propping up the country's banks.
So Ireland can slow down a little bit the rate of reform of its economy and the rate of cuts. Meanwhile, Greece is in its 5th year of recession, and rising fuel costs have added to the misery from austerity measures. As temperatures drop, many Greeks are looking for alternatives to traditional oil and gas to heat their homes. This report from William Vesipoulos and Emmanuel Bayon.
The residents of this block of flats in a northern district of Athens receive what might be their only oil delivery of the year. But this year, the supply, which feeds the building's central heating system, is unlikely to meet demand.
Last year, we ordered about 1,500 to 1,600 litres, but this year we'll only put in 1,000 litres.
An amount that's unlikely to see them through the winter. In the space of just 1 year, the price of a litre of oil used for heating has soared from 95 cents to more than €1.30 per litre, meaning heating has become a luxury only some can afford. The situation is the same in the building next door.
We'll have to economise to have heating all winter. We saved money for fuel. Some people will switch on their heating, some won't.
With heating costs up and the economic crisis in full effect, many are turning to other means of heating their homes, like burning wood in a fireplace or stove. And what's bad for consumers is also bad for suppliers. Stefanos, who sells domestic fuel, is hoping that temperatures will plummet, meaning people will have little choice than to turn on the heating.
I hope people will end up buying the oil. Of course, it won't be like it was in previous years. I think sales will be around 20 to 25% lower than last year.
For now, Greeks facing stagnant or falling wages and rising fuel costs are just hoping that this year's winter will be a mild one.
Stephen, you're also monitoring something that we've mentioned before in business news, is the bickering, the difficult, the increasingly strained relationship between Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, are you a Twitterer? Do you tweet?
I have about half a dozen tweets to my name, and the last one dates back to 2009, so I guess that's a no.
Okay, fine. Well, Twitter and Instagram is the photo sharing service that a lot of people use on Twitter. It's usually got different filters on photos. You can see some of them there, the examples of what they managed to do with it. Instagram has stopped allowing Twitter's mobile apps to view their photos in line, so you have to actually go click through a link to go to Instagram's website to view those photos. Now, it's a big change. There's 100 million Instagram users. It's a really big change for them. The company was bought out by Facebook for $1 billion in April. And there's a big changes happening to Instagram's user conditions, privacy policy changes, that user data is going to be shared.
So now when you take a picture with Instagram,
yeah,
what happens?
You can share it on Instagram itself, but it won't automatically share to Twitter. You'll have to actually click through. Now, this has had a really interesting effect on the graphic, on the find the traffic from the Twitter app to Instagram, you can see there the purple line as it plunges down is the traffic from one to the other, and the little grey line that comes up is the increased traffic to Instagram. So they've really lost out in the number of people they're seeing. That's important because Instagram wants to introduce advertising to make some revenue. On the other hand, Twitter has introduced its own photo filter service, so a lot of competition for that very small market.
And is that already functional? Is
yes,
that
up and running.
Already operational. All right, thank you very much. Stephen Carroll, that was it for Business News. World News is back with Stuart Norville in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.